is Terry Bradshaw, quarterback, Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
This is baseball, Major League Baseball. And this is
ABC's Monday Night Baseball, live from Fenway Park in Boston, Massachusetts.
Looking. He's under the gun. He's tied. He throws. It is.
Welcome to the April 12th, 1976 issue of Sports Illustrated and the April 12th, 2026 episode of Past Our Prime. Trio of hosts here each week with me, Scott Johnston, joined by Bill Mahoney and Mark Hoffman. And guys, on the cover this week, arguably the best player in baseball in the 70s. It wasn't the Big Red Machine until little Joe Morgan got there. What a player he was. Bill, what do you remember most about this do-it-all second baseman?
I remember the fact that his size, because he wasn't a big guy, and I remember he could do everything on the field. When I remember watching him come into Dodger Stadium with the Reds, he could hit, he could field, he could steal, he could hit for power. He was just an amazing ball player all the way around, but he also had a really great smile, because I always thought, man, he just looks like a really nice guy.
The one thing I wanted to mention real quickly about Morgan was that unique batting stance he had, the one where his like elbow would stick out and he was like he was pretending to be a chicken. It would go up and down, up and down, up and down. It was a really unique batting stance, but man, he could hit. Yeah,
he little flap. And of course, you know, all kids loved that. A hitting coach would hate it because that's not how you want to teach a kid. They teach kids to be as steady as possible. And here the best hitter in baseball is flapping his wings. But someone else who remembers a whole lot more about this Hall of Famer is ESPN's Tim Kurkjian. And in just a little bit, Tim will be joining us to talk some baseball. Looking forward to talking with the guy we've all been watching and reading for much of our lives. And once again, he's a huge baseball fan, so looking forward to that. Hey, before we get to Tim, let's get to the movie talking an all-time classic film. Mark, you do the honors.
Oh, man, it's a review on Bad News Bears, which is one of the classic sports movies of all time. So many people say this is their favorite sports movie, and the reviewer actually didn't like it, you know? I mean, not that it said it was the worst thing ever, but just that, you know, it was, you know, kind of so-so, you know, it was like it didn't quite hit, you know, the spots. But I'll let you guys talk about it for a little bit, but I got some great trivia about the movie once you guys finish. But I think the person ended the reviewer saying that it just like I don't know, it just wasn't you know, all the jokes didn't work or whatever, and the players were annoying and stuff like that.
Yeah, she wrote, Matthew was amusing, but the kids with their routine wisecracks, whoops, and jeers are disappointing. Their shenanigans are not up to the standard of the Little Rascals. You know, Billy, you and I saw this a couple years ago down in spring training on the big screen.
We loved it.
And I thought it held up rather well.
It does, because it's real. It's how kids probably, I know they, you know, spoke a lot similar to that back when I was growing up. So, no, I love the movie. He said it was like something like The Dirty Dozen meets Lilies of the Field, and it just doesn't quite work.
Mathau is great in it.
As the Tanner kid,
you know, beer guzzling. You know, he doesn't want to manage the team, and he's a grump. The kids are horrible, right? They get destroyed in the first game, and he turns this ragtag bunch into a good. And then, of course, Kelly Leak is an all-time classic.
Yep, that's a name that people know.
Yeah, Jackie Earl Haley, who I used to see work out at the gym in the late '80s.
There is a scene at the end where the dad of the other team, what are the Yankees, and he's really tough on his kid. I remember seeing that stuff when I played Little League. Maybe not someone coming out and, you know, hitting their kid, but, you know, it really did carry over the years, much more than the Billy Bob Thornton one, which I didn't like.
I did not see the remake.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Didn't miss much.
But there's some great trivia from this movie. Like, for instance, the person that wrote the movie is Burt Lancaster's son, the famous actor, which I
That's
found
right.
fascinating.
And he was
Right,
really young. He was like 26.
right. Vic Morrow played the opposing
Yep.
manager who, like 5 years
Hit
later,
the
would be
kid.
killed in that, or
Yep.
6 years later in that tragic Twilight Zone helicopter
Yep.
crash.
Yep.
And then apparently Tatum O'Neal wasn't the original lead. It was going to be Jodie Foster. And I
Hmm.
don't know how it happened, but Foster then took the role in Taxi Driver, which got her, I believe, an Oscar nomination. Yeah. And that's how Tatum O'Neal then came into the role.
Tatum O'Neal did a great job.
She did.
Also memorable. That movie is just really. I remember going with you, Scott. It was a great movie. You and I had a great time.
Yeah.
We didn't feel like it was, it passed its time. No.
So as you and I remember walking out, and there were a few jokes in there that nowadays would really ruffle some feathers because people are more offended by certain things.
Yeah.
Tanner
Oh
Boyle
yeah. Oh
says a
yeah.
few
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. You couldn't say
but
it, could they?
those were the times, and
Didn't offend me though, unfortunately.
no, that's how a lot of people talked back then.
Yeah, and I remember
Okay.
Lupus was as much as Tanner, was a loudmouth in that way. It was the little Lupus guy that was sort of the butt of the jokes. If you'd
Yes.
stop picking your nose and eating your boogers, you wouldn't get beaten up so much.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and being the kid that couldn't play the outfield, I related to that real quickly, real closely. A ball coming out, you're like, oh God, not me. And it goes in the middle, you're like, oh my God,
I remember a fly ball in Little League, and the thing took the longest to come down. I'm like in left field, and I'm just waiting for the thing to come down. Don't drop it, don't drop it. And it's just taken forever for that damn ball to come down.
All I remember about Little League is the manager about 19 times a game going, Mahoney, what are you doing? I wasn't doing anything right. So I just, Bad News Bears, I related to very, very well.
Hey, one guy who could play baseball pretty well as we get to the scorecard was a guy by the name of Jim LaFountain. I had never heard of him. I assume you guys had never heard of him, but
Nope.
he had a day to remember 50 years ago. He's a 200-pound right-handed hitter, played first base for the University of Louisville. Listen to this. Against Western Kentucky, the game only went 5 innings because Louisville won 26-4. In those 5 innings, LaFountain hit 4 home runs, 3 of them with the bases loaded, 2 of them in the same inning. He had 14 runs batted in. So an all-time great. I looked up, maybe you guys found more on him, but didn't ever seem to do much else after that. Had a good season that year, but nothing out of this world. But man, for 5 innings, he was amazing. And then the weird thing is that this year, Baylor's Tice Armstrong, he's the only other player to ever hit 3 grand slams in a game. He did so on opening day of the 2026 college baseball season. So 50
Wow.
years later, the first guy since LaFountain to hit 3 slams in a game, Baylor's Tice Armstrong.
Was Chano Park pitching?
Yeah, I remember that.
That's the one who gave up the
Fernando
2 grand slams
Tatis.
in the same inning.
The same inning, yeah.
How are you still in the game?
Right? Yeah. Billy, what do you got?
Sam Snead, the golfer, just going to offer some classic and honest advice. He says if you're going to chip, practice it at home. Lay down a carpet and aim for a basket. That seems pretty good. He also says work often with a 5-iron. But then he comes back and sets it all straight. He says, I know some of you think you're going to learn something here, but I don't think you will. Thanks, Sam. Give us advice and then say, it's not going to work anyhow.
Yeah. Thanks for wasting my time.
Mark?
Before I get to mine, I just wanted to quickly say, they said if LaFountain had done that over 162 game schedule, like it was a major leaguer, he would end the year with 1,166 homers and 4,082 RBIs.
They'd eventually have to pitch around him, you'd think.
Yeah.
You would think so. So I remember this as night and day, okay? The Oscars and the NCAA championship game were on the same night. And that would never happen today. Never, okay? You're not going to put 2 major things on at the same time. And so they was doing an awards presentation for, I forgot it was whatever the category was. And Elliot Gould was one of the presenters, who, by the way, is still with us. I used to do physical therapy with him. And anyway, Elliot Gould, they go, and the winner is, and Elliot Gould cuts in before they said who the actual winner was and said, Indiana 86, Michigan 68. So Gould was a huge sports fan, and I thought that was hilarious that he mentioned the NCAA championship score that night at the Oscars.
Yeah.
And that is a super great trivia question that I never thought of until I read this in Sports Illustrated, and then it clicked in my brain. Oh my God, I remember that.
Yeah, that's funny because I came across that as well. And it's a funny
But I
clip.
remember seeing that
Funny
live.
clip.
I don't
It's some, and he's presenting with some French actress. She has no idea what the hell he's talking about.
Exactly. She's like, huh?
Very funny.
Back when quotes were bold, they said it. Back when quotes were bold, they said it.
They said it, Billy.
Ron Meyer, he's the SMU coach. He says each guy in his team has $400 worth of equipment, and nothing looks like it's going to get broken. That's not a good team.
No, it's not.
That is not.
But he had a good career as a coach.
He did.
How about this one? Ren Blair, Pittsburgh Penguins president, asked if Ken Schinkel was an interim coach. He said, aren't all coaches interim coaches?
True.
Some are just a little longer, but Bill Belichick was an interim coach for the Patriots.
What's the joke?
Yep.
Yeah, he's day to day, aren't we all? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Dan Patrick used to say that all the time. Cotton Fitzsimmons, Mark.
Yep, he had just been fired as the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks. He arrived 15 minutes late for his post-firing press conference. Why he showed, I don't know. He said, I didn't realize how many people they were in the unemployment line.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a coach today getting fired? Wouldn't have to worry about that.
No. And Bill, this Fitzsimmons, he's one of those coaches that you mentioned a couple months ago. He coached, it seemed like, a dozen teams.
Every team.
So did Kevin Lockery. So did Hubie Brown. They just all kind of
Doug Moe. Always the same guys. When I was a kid, someone would get fired. Fitzsimmons would be in. Kevin Lockery would be in. It'd be the same guys over and over and over. They always had a job.
You know what I remember about Fitzsimmons the most? He always wore those loud plaid pants. It was like one of his trademarks, I believe.
Yeah, and he was with the Phoenix Suns broadcast team for years and years and years. All right, let's talk a little horse racing. He's a beaut, honest pleasure. Dominated the Florida Derby, winning easily for his 6th straight stakes victory. He's a top contender for the Kentucky Derby. His win was so decisive and heavily favored that he paid record low odds, showing overwhelming public confidence, somewhat like Secretariat from a couple years ago. Bill, what was the betting line on this race?
He came in as a 1-9 favorite. So he had more than 130,000 bet on him, 26,000 plus on all the other horses combined. So the payouts you might expect were minimal. Paid $210 to win, $320 to place, and $210 to show.
Man,
there was no money in that.
If you bet $9, you would win one.
Yes. Yeah. Hey. And there's people that did it, I'm sure. I mean, $130,000 or $130,000 bet on him.
Absolutely.
Did you look at his record though? In 75, 76, he won the Champagne Stakes, the Laurel Future. I can't pronounce this word. So they're all words we can't pronounce.
That one.
Futurity, Futurity. See, I can't pronounce a simple word.
Tutti Frutti.
Yeah, thank you. There you go. The Arlington, Washington Stakes, the Cowden Stakes, the Florida Derby, the Flamingo Stakes, the Travis Stakes, the Blue Grade Stakes, the Ben Alley Handicap American Classic. All those he won between 75 and 77. But what did he do with the Kentucky Derby? He finishes second.
Yeah, and that finish, that
loser.
Second, it seemed to almost take the wind out of his sails, or at least out of his trainer and all them, because he didn't do that well next in the Preakness. And I don't think he ran the Belmont, so he didn't do anything.
I think he finished 5th in the Preakness.
Yeah. But you're right. Other than that, in those other stakes races, he was unbeatable. And as Bill mentioned, the odds on him, he was the overwhelming favorite as well. So, and then went on to sire about a gazillion horses. So
Lived
pretty
to be
good,
19.
pretty good life for Mr. Pleasure. Good times roll for Shirley. Shirley Babashoff carried U.S. women's swimming back in the day. She wins multiple events, remains the country's top Olympic hope amid declining dominance. The U.S. team struggled overall against those East German women, but Shirley Babashoff, guys, quite an underrated swimmer when you look back at what she did with her career.
Yeah, I mean, if you okay, just look at the Olympics, okay? She won 3 gold and 6 silvers between the 72 and 76 Olympics. And then in terms of like the World Championships, she won 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 10 of those. So, I mean, truly a dominant swimmer, but nobody's heard of her today.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about her in coming weeks, but one thing that I looked up ahead of time is that she was one of the first to say that the East German women are cheating.
That
That
did
they
not go over well
No.
either.
and it did not. They called her
No.
a whiner and a sore loser. And she wasn't just saying they're cheating. That's why she was like, no, something is amiss. And everybody in the international sports world basically turned a blind eye. But she will be proven correct in some time. So a very interesting person in the swimming history. War in the Pacific. We're talking a little NBA basketball, and it's kind of funny because there's 3 teams basically, or 4 teams playing for 3 spots in the Pacific in the playoffs. One of them being the Lakers, and despite acquiring Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, they're struggling. Billy.
Their road record is 18 and 62 over the last 2 years, and they've had no home sellouts in 2 years. Just if you think of the Lakers nowadays, you can't get a ticket. But back in the day, even with Kareem, they just couldn't get people in the house. So they're thinking about getting rid of Bill Sharman, and they're bringing up the rumors, and it's always the same people, or it's always the who's who of people. Bobby Knight is on the list. Bill Fitch is on the list. And then they settled on a guy that was pretty good, Jerry West. You think of the Lakers now, though, and you think, man, this is a team that those tickets are astronomically priced. But in that day, in those years, even with Kareem, nothing.
That's insane. It's
Yeah.
hard to even fathom that that's a possibility.
Yeah, because
Also,
I was going to say, what's crazy out of those 3 teams, Sonics, Suns, and Lakers, you think the Lakers were the one shoe-in that would have made the playoffs that year.
Yep.
and you'd also think, trying to picture Bobby Knight as
Oh
a
my God.
as
Working
a
with professionals.
NBA head coach, that would not have gone over well.
No.
Oh my gosh. And this was Kareem at his
Yeah.
still dominant self.
Yep.
He was unguardable back then. This is pre-Showtime. Now it's funny that you mentioned Jerry West because Jerry West did not like coaching.
No.
Did not do it for very long, and then went and found what he was truly a genius at, and that was putting teams together. But including that first Showtime run that starts a couple years from now. But right now, this is right. I moved to LA in '78, and I can remember that the Lakers were they were fair to Midland, but they were
Yep.
not a shoe-in. Despite having Kareem, they were not a shoe-in. That's about to change a couple years later. Last week, they held the Masters. Judy Rankin won the biggest women's golf event of the year with an outstanding final round. She was one of the better golfers of her time. Billy, tell me a little bit more about Judy Rankin.
Let's just go through her 1976 highlights. She had 6 wins, won the most money, was the player of the year, and as you guys know very well, she won the Vare Trophy, which is the lowest scoring average throughout the year. Then you go by her career. She had 19 LPGA wins, but never officially won a major. Now, what does that mean officially? Two of her wins, I think it was the Dinah Shore and one other one, were elevated to major status, but she doesn't get credit for them because she won them prior before they were actually moved to major status. Yeah.
Wow.
So she did. I mean, if you just look at her career, it seems a gaping hole there with no majors. But it seems to me you could go back and retroactively give her those majors from the Dinah Shore, and I forgot the other one that she actually won.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's a Colgate sponsored tournament. At the time, it brought unprecedented money and attention and prestige. But and then it gets linked to Dinah Shore, and then, as you mentioned, Billy, later becomes a major. And Mark, Dinah Shore was huge when it came to women's golf. Who was she, and what did she do for the game?
Well, first of all, she was a singer actress, and she hosted a talk show, very popular talk show, and she dated Burt Reynolds, or was she married to
Yeah.
Reynolds for a while?
Mhm.
But beautiful woman, had a talk show, sang, acted, just all around talent. Anyway, in 1972, she started this golf tournament, and it was Dinah Shore and Colgate, Palmolive, were the sponsors of it. And it's one of the 5 majors on the LPGA tour, which is interesting because most sports have 4 majors. LPGA has 5 majors, and this is one of them, but it's been reincarnated over the years. So again, like I say, it starts as Colgate Dinah Shore, then it's Colgate, then it's Nabisco Dinah Shore, then it becomes just sponsors like the Nabisco Championships. Now it's the Chevron Championships. But it all started with Dinah Shore, and she would always be at the tournaments. She had like a southern drawl, it just made it very homey.
And if I'm not mistaken, it's the Dinah Shore tournament that our past guest Amy Alcott
Yep.
dove
Yep.
into the
The
pond,
river.
and that became kind of a trademark for that tournament. Forget what the pond was called.
Happy's Pond.
Poppy's Pond.
Happy's Pond wasn't it Pappy's
Yeah,
Pond?
yeah.
Yeah.
And
And I believe Amy has won it 3 times, that tournament,
that's
which I
right.
think, which
Yeah,
is tied with Betsy King and Annika Sorenstam for the most times, I think, to win that tournament.
yeah, and really kind of helped by Amy not just winning, but by the doing that and then making that a part of the tradition. Really, really brought some prominence to that. So good for her. All right, let's talk a little baseball. That's what this issue is all about. The 1976 baseball season. Season got underway a little bit late. No games were missed, but there was a labor lockout, I think it was, in spring training. Cost them 17 days of spring training, which to me would be a horror these days. And
Yeah.
we're staring right into that abyss going into 2027. But try not to think about that. Over in the American League, of course, 1975 was the year of Fred Lynn, MVP and Rookie of the Year. Often overlooked that year was the guy to his right playing left field for the Red Sox. Jim Rice finished second in Rookie of the Year voting and third in MVP. How about this for a rookie season? 309, 22 homers, 102 RBIs. Just a sensational freshman year for Jim Rice, who would go on to have the Hall of Fame career, not Fred Lynn. So AL East seems to be a two-team race, the Sox and the Yankees. That's partially, Mark, because the Tigers are just getting older they're like dogs. They're like 7 years for every real year.
The Tigers, they had Ron LaFleur, who was discovered in prison, and Billy Martin brought him to the Tigers and went stolen. But he was a great player. Had a long hitting streak, stole a ton of bases. But they discovered that year from the prison records that he wasn't 24; he was actually 28. So he added 4 years. But he was still fast. It's not like he went from you know, 24 to 35. That would have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
But that Tigers team was not great, though. Fidrich captured the imagination, but LaFleur's 4 years older. They trade for Rusty Staub, the Legrand Orange, because of his red hair. In fact, they named a cat after him because it was a red cat, an orange red cat, and reminded him of Rusty. And that 75 team had been so bad, so 76 brought new life. But in addition to the Ron LaFleur stuff, the thing I found really hilarious was John Hiller, their closer, their ace reliever, shaved his head one day because he was watching Kojak. It's a Philly Savalas. So he decided, I'm going to shave my head.
Yeah. That's a bad idea, John. Bad idea.
Yep. Yeah. They didn't have a winning record, but they sure had some unique characters on that team.
And then by the next season, Ron LaFleur was 39 and out of baseball.
Yeah. He ended up on the Montreal Expos. So,
Yep. Hey Billy, the AL West and all of baseball that year, lots of off-season moves. And the thing that was great about back then is free agency was like in its infancy, basically. These off-season moves were just trades, people getting traded all over the place.
I know Orioles get Holtzman and Jackson. A's get Baylor and Torres. The Angels picked up Bobby Bonds and Bill Melton. Yankees get Mickey Rivers and Ed Figueroa. Man, it's some good stuff going on in fun times in baseball.
Yeah, it reminds me almost of the NFL now, where every March and then with the free agency and then with the draft, there's like a renewed sense of optimism for like every organization. I'm not saying every team thinks they're going to win the Super Bowl, but they're like, hey, we've improved. We're going to be better. And that was the case back then with baseball. Is like, we got the Angels got
Bonds and
Bobby
Melton.
Bonds. He's going to
Yeah.
be great, blah, blah, blah. And, that just doesn't happen for too many baseball teams. They have a bad season the year before, and yeah, maybe they drafted really well, and they've got some 18, 19-year-old kids that are going to be good in 5 years, but there's no hope for the team coming out of spring training oftentimes. It's
But
kind of
it
sad.
does for the Royals though, because the Royals are just about to surge under Whitey Herzog because they're led by George Brett. Because I remember, wasn't it they had the great playoffs against the Yankees at the end of the year.
Yeah. Yep. They will unseat the A's. 5 years of winning their division is going to come to an end this year because of George Brett and John Mayberry and Freddie Patek, and that Royals team for the next
Twins.
5, 6 years is going to be
Yeah.
great.
Man, they Royals, God, I hated when they came into Anaheim. They just George Brett never ever got out against the Angels.
I think actually we can prove that to be true at some point.
Yes.
He had
I
like
mean, he played 15
16
years
hits in
every
a
time.
row against them or something like
Yes.
that. Over in the National League East, the Pirates win it in 75. It's basically, once again, a two-team race. The Pirates are the old vanguard. They're going to win a World Series coming up in a couple years. And the Phillies are about to become really, really good. But yeah, you mentioned it, Mark. The Tigers got Rusty Staub, and they got him for Mickey Lolich. How about that? He gets traded to the Mets. I did not remember Mickey Lolich with the Mets.
There's so many players that you remember how they ended their career on a different team. And, this is not the same Mickey Lolich. Bob had some really good years with the Tigers. And from what I remember from Stubb, I want to say he had either a really short bat or something. It was something very unique when he came to the plate. I want to say his bat was tiny or something like that. But yeah, it was a great player. Didn't look like a super athlete, but a great baseball player.
Cardinals have Lou Brock, Bake McBride, Reggie Smith, Ted Simmons is coming on, so they're about to get a lot better. And of course, you got the crappy Cubs and Expos seen as long shots. So over in the NL West, the Dodgers, they went to the World Series in 74 before the big red machine finally put it all together in 75, won the World Series, beating the Red Sox in 7. So the Reds and Dodgers are the two teams to beat in that division, despite the Giants having, remember the Count, John Montefiusco?
Yep.
He had a great rookie season. And then Astros have Cesar Cedeno. Padres are horrible, but even the Padres, had Randy Jones. Randy
Yep.
Jones was a great pitcher for a couple years down in San Diego, but they'll all be chasing the defending champion Cincinnati Reds and the little big man, our cover story, Joe Morgan on his MVP season, emphasizing that confidence and arrogance are essential traits for sustaining success as a star player. Billy, you mentioned, that he was always smiling. He really seemed to love playing baseball, but this guy was a very serious baseball player too.
Yeah, no question. You look at his stats. Every day, every time he played, he said, "I'm not the best," but he is saying he's the most complete player. And that I think is 100% correct.
Yeah, what could he not do? He could hit for
Yeah.
power. His on base percent, he walked
Yep.
a crap ton of times, led the league in walks numerous times, Gold Glover.
Yep.
Not only stole bases, but had a really high percentage of being safe. He basically had no weakness, and like like Jim Palmer mentioned, they did not win until Joe Morgan got to Cincinnati.
And
His
also remember what was the guest we talked about? The one that wrote the book on the Reds. And when the Reds were trying to get him from Houston, they had to check out because no one thought, or they were told that Morgan didn't have the greatest character when he was with the Astros.
yeah,
Hmm.
Daryl
So they had to do
Smith.
background on him, and he came over, the great team player. Bad deal for Houston, and also, talking bad about him like he's not the guy that we all knew to come and love.
The fans were like, I think they traded Lee May and something else
Yeah.
for
Right.
Morgan, and they were like, "Are you people insane?"
Yep.
So good stuff. For the three of us, reliving the 1976 baseball season and the Big Red Machine is right in our wheelhouse, and our guest makes our trio a quartet. Baseball has been his professional life for close to 50 years, not quite, but close. And certainly he chose that life because of teams like the Reds and players like the guy on the cover of this week's issue, Joe Morgan, longtime ESPN reporter, analyst, and former senior writer at Sports Illustrated starting in the late 80s. I'm talking about Tim Kurkjian, who's covered decades of the game, World Series classics, Hall of Famers, to just the day-to-day joys of the box scores brought to guys like us on an everyday basis. Thanks for joining us, Tim.
My pleasure, Scott, Mark, Bill. Really good to be here.
Oh, how much do you miss box scores, Tim?
Well, you guys may know the story of how pathetic I was at one point in my life. I cut out every box score, taped them in my notebook for 20 consecutive years. I never missed a day. And I think we can all agree that's way more impressive than any streak by Cal Ripken. One night, I actually woke up at 11:45, jumped out of bed because I realized I had forgotten to do my box score book that day. And my wife sees me leap out of bed at 11:45. She knows exactly where I'm going. I go, cut out the box scores. I come back and I get that look, which we all have. How could I have married such an unfathomable geek? That's the way it worked with the box scores. But you guys know this. You can learn an awful lot by reading the box scores. In fact, Gene Mauch once showed me while he was the manager of the California Angels. He showed me how to read a box score and using all the elements of it. Who made the who made the last out in the game? Sometimes it's easy to tell that. Sometimes it's not. And he showed me the formula. Wow. Gene Mauch, the manager of the Angels, just the two of us in his office one day. It was fascinating.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can't tell you how many games I would recreate in my head just through the box score, how things went. Now they hand it to you. You don't have to study it all. It's right there.
It's right there. So good.
Lost art. Let's go back to our guy on the cover. The Reds are looking to repeat as World Series champs. Joe Morgan is looking to repeat as National League MVP. I think for some reason people forget how great a player Joe was. But you could make the argument, kind of an easy one in some cases, that he is the greatest second baseman in baseball history. No?
You could make that argument. I would take Rogers Hornsby over him just because, again, different time, different era. Hit 400 for a 5-year period, hit 358 lifetime, and not just 358 with significant power and production. He was a better defensive second baseman than people think. However, Joe Morgan, since I've been covering, is the best second baseman that I've ever seen. And that 75-76 season, only second baseman ever to win a back-to-back MVP. And he was so overwhelmingly good. Johnny Bench once told me, Joe Morgan is the best player that I've ever played with or played against at any position. That's how good Joe Morgan was as a second baseman. And those 2 years were just ridiculous. I remember Jim Palmer telling me once, the Reds did not become the Big Red Machine until Joe Morgan showed up. And I don't think there's any argument there.
Yes, I read that quote in the article you wrote about Joe when he passed back in 2020. And it seems impossible that he's been gone for 6 years already. One thing I loved about Joe, the broadcaster, And a lot of guys get in trouble for this with the cynical world we live in. But he was unabashed and unashamed to show how much he loved the game. He truly loved it. As someone who got to know Joe pretty well, what was he like?
Well, I really enjoyed being around Joe, but you had to be careful with Joe because Joe was really set in his ways in a really good way. Like, for instance, I hope I can share this story properly. Peter Gammons went into the Hall of Fame, was honored by the Hall of Fame, and everyone called him a Hall of Famer, which I'm okay with. But Joe Morgan always made it clear that, the writers are over here and the real Hall of Famers are over here. He is 100% right about that. So he was one of the great protectors of the game. And I know that if he felt like there was a second baseman who was getting too much attention necessarily and wasn't a great player, he was the first guy to point that out. I've always said that Johnny Bench told me, Jim Palmer told me, like, no one understood the game better than Joe Morgan. And he was able to present it so beautifully as a player and then as a broadcaster. And yes, he loved every bit of it. And Scott, you know this, in order to be really good at the game, you have to love every bit of it. I mean, nobody ran the bases better than Joe Morgan. No one got a better lead than Joe Morgan. No one understood how to go first to third better than Joe Morgan. I mean, these are the little things, which aren't little. They are winning things, and nobody did those things better than Joe Morgan.
Also, Tim, Joe Morgan wasn't a big guy. So the fact that he got every ounce of talent out of his body was quite amazing.
Yeah, he's, I know all about little guys. I'm just under 5'5" these days. So I always gravitate to the little guys. Joe Morgan was 5'7" tops. And Jim Palmer once told me, pound for pound, he might be the greatest player of all time. And this thought that Joe was that short, but he used that size to his advantage. I mean, we know, his walk to strikeout rate was just, I mean, he had over 800 more walks than strikeouts in his career. And so he used his size to his advantage, and his quickness around the bag, making the double play, his ability to steal a base was just remarkable. And it was all built into that little body. And it's not a surprise that he grew up loving Nellie Fox, another really short second baseman who put a lot of balls in play, even more than Joe Morgan did. So, so I've done my all short team many times. And short meaning 5'8" and below, he's the second baseman. And you could make a case he's the greatest short player of all time. Yogi Berra's in that conversation, few others, but Joe Morgan can make the case for being the greatest short player ever.
And it's pretty perfect that you write that.
Yes, well, I would have to write that. I know all about little guys. I remember I had a height off once with Jose Altuve, who's only an inch taller than me. And I looked at him. I didn't call for the height off. My producer said, go stand back to back with him and let's see who's taller. So I looked at Jose and I said, I've never won one of these. And he looked at me and he goes, neither have I until now. He was an inch taller than me. We love Jose Altuve. We love all the short guys. And Joe Morgan took tremendous amount of pride being maybe the shortest guy on the field, but also the best guy on the field.
Well, being 5'7", I always enjoy my short guys as well. So Jose Altuve, love him. But one thing we always talked about here when we did our shows last year, Joe Morgan had an amazing 75, also 76. But at the end of the 75 season, Pete Rose was the Sportsman of the Year. Why did Joe Morgan not win that?
Well, that's a really good question because the season he had in 75 was absurdly good. He had a WAR over 10. He broke all sorts of records for second baseman, doing home runs, steals, walks, all that. But Pete was much more of a showman. There's no way around that. Joe was not anybody who cuddled next to the writers or anything else. He was not always the most popular guy out there, but that shouldn't make you the Sportsman of the Year. He was the best baseball player in the game in 1975 and 76. He should have won, but Pete Rose. He people gravitated to him. He was a huge personality. Joe just didn't live that life, and in a lot of ways, it made him an even better player.
Yeah, he also was that. Scott was just saying he had the game-winning RBI in Game 7 of the World Series that year too.
Right. I mean, absolutely. Sparky Anderson once said, Joe Morgan is a great player when all the time, but when the stakes get the biggest, he becomes one of the greatest players of all time. That's the way Joe Morgan was. And even though that was just a little bloop single to center field off of Jim Burton to win that game, it was no surprise that Joe Morgan got the biggest hit to finish one of the greatest World Series ever played.
So that 1976 Cincinnati Reds team, was that the best of the Big Red Machine era? Because they won 102 games and they didn't lose a game in the postseason. Was there any other of those era Reds teams that could match that?
Well, I maintain that the 75-76 Reds, when you combine them, are the greatest team in the history of the National League. And I'm pretty confident in saying that. I mean, they won, 108 games and then 102 games. And the 76 season, that they didn't just sweep the Phillies. The Phillies were a 100-win team that year. And the Reds swept them. The Yankees were really good in 76, and the Reds swept them. So they played 7 postseason games that year and won them all. Now, granted, it's hard to do that today because there are more rounds and more games and everything else, but I feel pretty confident that the 76 team was the best of all the Reds teams. But when you combine 75, 76, those are the two, together, the two greatest teams in the history of the National League.
So if the Reds were the best team in 1976, who was the best player? Because there's so many candidates. I mean, you could look at Nolan Ryan. I mean, look at George Brett. I mean, Mike Schmidt. I mean, how do you pick a best player from that year?
Yeah, it's really hard to do, but Joe Morgan won the MVP that year, so he has to be the best player. I remember Pete Rose telling me once that he used to go to Mike Schmidt and say, "You're the best player I've ever seen." And, you're the best player I've ever played with. This is when Pete went to the Reds. But Pete also played with Joe Morgan with the Reds. And I just don't know how you can get better than a guy who, did what he did during that 2-year stretch. I mean, you guys have seen the numbers. He struck out 93 times in a 2-year period. Now, if you strike out 93 times in one season, you're one of the great plate protectors in the game. So to walk 246 times and strike out 93 times over a 2-year period is just remarkable to me. And everything he did, I think he grounded into 5 double plays in those 2 years combined. These are the little things that I believe he got caught stealing 19 times total during 2 years, which is just absurd. I mean, guys make outs on the bases all the time. Joe Morgan certainly was not that guy.
We're talking with longtime ESPN baseball analyst, former Sports Illustrated writer Tim Kurkjian about baseball past and present here on Past Our Prime. Tim, you get your break in the late 70s and you're going to cover the Baltimore Orioles, a team you knew very well from being around those parts. Can you tell me about the time you first met Hall of Fame manager Earl Weaver?
Well, of course, but we're gonna have to bleep it out. Dan Shaughnessy, Hall of Fame writer Dan Shaughnessy was the baseball writer at the Washington Star, and I became the backup baseball writer at the Washington Star in 1980. So I got to do a few games. So Dan takes me to meet Earl Weaver. I'm on the field and I'm scared to death because I'm like 14 years old. Earl Weaver is one of the greatest managers of all time. And Dan says to Earl on the field, "Earl, this is Tim. He's going to be covering some games when I'm away." And Earl looks at me and goes, "F you, Tim," and walks away. That was it. That's the first time I ever met Earl Weaver in my life. I almost started to cry because one of the greatest managers of all time F-bombed me for having just met me. So Earl walks away. And I don't know what to do. And Dan says, "Oh, don't worry. That's what Earl does to all the guys that he really likes." And I'm thinking, really likes me? He just met me 3 seconds ago. How could that be? Well, as it turns out, I covered Earl in 80 and 81. And then he came back in 86. And I was the everyday beat writer for the Baltimore Sun. So I covered every game that year. So I was with Earl like seemingly 24 hours a day. And famously, that team was really good until the beginning of August, and then they just fell apart and went 14 and 42 the rest of the way. But I'll never forget Earl in Oakland on a Sunday morning in September looked at me and said, "Tim, this is the worst lineup I've ever filled out in a major league game in my life." And that's when I kind of knew, all right, this might be it for Earl, 86 and done, because that team just finished so poorly. But I could tell you 100 Earl Weaver stories anytime you like.
Oh, love it.
That's great.
Love it. You graduate from your days covering the Orioles, and next thing you know, you're writing for Sports Illustrated. What was it like walking into that newsroom when the magazine was at the peak of journalism in sports?
Yeah, it was intimidating beyond words. So my first day ever at Sports Illustrated, they invited me up for, and it was, you guys are going to have to help me on this, but it was like the 35th anniversary. So this is 1989, right? So I go into, and they brought back all these guys who've been on the cover multiple times. I mean, there's stars everywhere. And the first person I run into is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's legitimately 2 feet taller than me. And I've never met Kareem in my life, but I recognize he's one of the greatest players of all time, still is one of the greatest players of all time. So I'm a little bit nervous because I'm talking to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And in a very brief conversation, I told him how much I loved his role in the movie Airplane, and he just walked off in a huff. So obviously I said the wrong thing to the wrong guy at the wrong time. But that was my foray into Sports Illustrated. But I'm telling you, fellas, when you're a daily baseball writer like me, and you're covering for the Baltimore Sun, and occasionally on deadline you could write a lousy story, but you don't have time. You got to get the thing in. At Sports Illustrated, everything changed. I was petrified every time I set a story in. And this goes 8 years. Every time I set a story in, I would say to myself, please like the story. Please don't hate this story, because the level of precision at that place, it was the greatest edited magazine in the history of magazines, in my opinion. If you wrote a bad one, it was the worst feeling in the world. I wrote my share, and I'll never forget that terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach that I had a week to write this story and they didn't like it.
Well, Tim, you did something right, because you became one of the first baseball guys to move into television. Were you nervous doing that? Obviously, being maybe the first guy to do it, or one of the first to do it?
Yeah, I was terrified by that also. Yeah, we were all at Sports Illustrated, and CNN came to us and said, "We want to form a new TV network called CNN SI. So we want all you SI writers to go on TV." So I said, "Well, I don't want to go on TV. I don't know how to do that. I don't want to do that." And a bunch of other writers said the same thing. But CNN said, "No, you're going on TV." And Sports Illustrated made me go on TV. And fortunately, I really enjoyed it after a while. But at the beginning, it was nerve-wracking beyond words. This is so bad. This never happened since. But I had to do a report on the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Tampa Bay Devil Rays joining the major leagues. And I was doing a live shot for CNN SI. So it's like I have to piggyback both of them together. So I do my little, 45 seconds on the Arizona Diamondbacks. And then I have to transition to the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. And I'm not kidding you, fellas. I had a brain cramp and I couldn't remember the name. Tampa Bay Devil Rays. So I froze like a fudgicle on national TV, and I didn't say a word for like 3 seconds, which in television is like 3 minutes. I had enough time to say to myself, that's it. Your television career is over. You just forgot the name of the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. Well, fortunately, it came to me. I finished the report, and I expected my producer to say to me, that was the worst live shot in the history of live shots. What happened to you? He didn't say a word. Either he wasn't paying attention, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I'm here to tell you it was awful, and I've never done it since. And I always remember that day. You better be prepared when you go on the air.
Well, you do great now, so you obviously have, gotten past that. You're great.
Well, thank you. When I went to CNNSI, I said, are you guys going to teach me how to do television? And they said, no, there's no time. You're a writer. You'll figure it out. Then a year later, I went to ESPN and I said, are you guys going to show me how to do TV? They go, no, you're a writer. There's no time. You'll figure it out. So I never got any formal training on this. They just threw me into the fire. Sometimes I burned, but eventually I kind of figured out how to do this.
You know what I love just listening to you, Tim, is the passion and the love you have for the game. You've been around it a long time. What is your favorite era? Do you like nowadays? Do you like back in the 70s? Are you an 80s guy? Which do you like?
Yeah, I'm a mid 80s guy, and I think it's because the game was played so beautifully back then. Look, fellas, you remember the mid 80s. We had Cal Ripken, George Brett, Robin Yount, Alan Trammell, Paul Molitor. Those guys played the game the right way. They didn't necessarily overpower the game with their physical gifts like so many guys are able to do today. They became great players because they knew how to play the game. So as a very young baseball writer, I learned the game, which I thought I knew pretty darn well before the mid 80s, but I learned watching those guys play. I learned talking to those guys. So I get in a lot of trouble for things like this, but I really think the game was played better 40 years ago. The game itself was played better. Balls in play, running the bases, taking the extra base, defense, all that. The players today are clearly bigger, stronger, faster, and probably better than ever. But the game was played better in the 80s, and maybe it was because I was such an impressionable young guy who just could not believe that I'm getting paid to travel all over the country to cover baseball games. And I was, and it was the greatest experience of my life. So that is my favorite era, the 80s.
Do you fear for the future of the sport? Everyone's talking about the lockout that's coming up, and we've lost a World Series. We've never lost a complete season from, spring training to the World Series. But you fear that we might be facing something that dire?
At this point, yes, that's my greatest fear. Fellas, I covered the 81 strike, and here it is 45 years later, and we're still arguing about similar things. I was there in 94, 95, which was just the worst experience ever that we lost the World Series. And we almost lost a lot more in 95 until the Tom Glavines of the world stood up and said, we're not going to let this happen again. At this moment, I am discouraged where we are about the labor situation for 2027. We are not in a good place. I had someone who's pretty close to things tell me he's never seen the two sides this far apart with the deadline this close. Granted, it's still 9 months away, but we got to get going on this because there's no good time for a work stoppage. This would be a really bad time for a work stoppage because of how great the World Series was last year, how great the World Baseball Classic was this year. The game has tremendous momentum right now, and we can't stop that momentum with a work stoppage.
So let's talk about something a little bit lighter now, since we've depressed all baseball fans around the country. Please, we want a 2027 season. When you came into the league, wasn't there a bit where players were impersonating you? There was actually some sort of contest?
Yeah, that was really ridiculous. That was the dumbest period of my life. You talk about my favorite era. This was my least favorite era. All right, I'll tell you the long. All right,
Sorry.
no, I'm
Thanks,
going to tell
Mark.
you that
Thanks.
this story is going to take a minute, but Tito Francona, the mischievous Tito Francona, comes to work at ESPN for 1 year in 2012. We go to Toronto's camp one day, and I was told that one of the guys on the Blue Jays, Ricky Romero, pitcher, told me JP Arancibia does the greatest impersonation of you that we've ever seen. He does it on the bus all the time, and the entire team laughs. So now I end up in the middle of the Toronto Blue Jays clubhouse in spring training, 60 guys circling me, and JP Arancibia does this preposterous impersonation of me. Everyone is laughing their asses off because it was really funny. But I wondered, if I sound like that, I got to go get a new voice or a new job, because that's ridiculous. So the point is, Tito Francona was in on this. And he decides, being the mischievous guy that he is, that we're going to ambush Tim. So while I was working on something else that day, he and Carl Ravitch interviewed JP Arancibia as if he was me. Like, this is Tim. And he uses this. And then I come on to the show, and I don't know that this tape segment has happened. And now I have to watch it on live TV. It was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. But what it did was it started a chain reaction. I went to like 5 other camps after that, and 5 different people were giving Tim Kurkjian impersonations, including Elliot Johnson of the Tampa Bay Rays. That was hilarious. And then I'm going to remember his name in a minute. And then we went to Colorado, and Ryan Dempster did an impersonation of Harry Carey interviewing me, and he used both voices. He impersonated both guys. It was so bad. He would say, like, "Hey, Tim, where do you get all those stats from?" And then he would use my stupid voice to answer the question. So this is what happened along the way. And so many dumb things happened. So finally, after all this settles down, I go to JP Arancibia, who started the whole thing. And I said, please tell me that you can impersonate a lot of people. Please tell me that you can do Jack Nicholson. And he goes, no, I can only do you. So the only impersonation he does is me. So bad.
Well, imitation is the serious form of flattery. Of course, you realize that.
Yes.
But was there one of them that came? Was there one who did it the best, or I guess the least worst for you?
I think the funniest one and the best one was when I went to Brewers camp, and Tim Dillard is relief pitcher for the Brewers at the time. And I think his was the best Tim Kurkjian. He had my inflection, he had everything else. But in order to make it like really realistic, he crouched down when he did it. He was behind the desk with Carl Ravitch and myself and whatever, David Ross, and he like got down to, now he's like 5 feet tall instead of 6'3". So he actually bent down when he did the impersonation. That's what I do. All right, this has got to stop. He's now, the impersonations are ridiculous. Now they're bending so they can be my height. So bad.
Oh, my golly, Tim, Mark, great question. That is really, really funny, Tim. Is there a time, you've obviously been in the field a long time there, Tim, and you loved baseball? I think I read that you and your family used to talk baseball at the breakfast table. Was there a player that you eventually met and were like, oh my gosh, this is who I've been reading about or learning about my whole life?
Yeah, that happened a bunch of times. And we didn't just talk baseball at the breakfast table. We talked at lunchtime. We talked at dinner time. My father was a great baseball man, a really good player in his day. He gave us a great feel for baseball. He taught us how to play, my 2 brothers and I. So this was the primary language spoken in our house growing up. This wasn't something I got interested in after college. This is something that was ingrained in me when I was literally 4 years old. So to answer your question, At the Hall of Fame one year, I forget the year, it's really not important. I got to interview Hank Aaron and Willie Mays at the same time. Hank Aaron and Willie Mays. I have one microphone back and forth between these two guys, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how is it possible that this dinky little guy from Bethesda, Maryland, is interviewing at that point, I think, the two greatest living players. And 10 minutes later, my producer comes up to me and he says, you're going to interview Ted Williams next. Ted Williams, my dad's all-time baseball hero. So there's a long story there. I'm going to try to make it short. Here's what they told me. You get 3 questions for Ted Williams. It's a taped interview. 2 minutes, 3 questions. That's it. And I'm thinking, we get Ted Williams and I'm only allowed to ask him 3 questions. I only get 2 minutes. What are you, crazy? So the first 2 questions go perfectly. He's so seamless. He's so smart. He's great. The third question was, it was the year Nolan Ryan went in the Hall of Fame. So I asked Ted Williams, what would the at-bat be like if you in your prime faced Nolan Ryan? So he's intrigued by this. But he says, that's not what I want to talk about. I want to tell you what the at-bat would be like if I faced Randy Johnson in my prime. Now, Randy Johnson's not going into the Hall of Fame that day, so this is a little bit off the topic. But he gives an answer that is so unbelievably good, but it takes him 5 minutes to answer the question. Literally 5 minutes. I have a 2-minute interview here, and he just goes on and on with the most fascinating conversation I've ever been involved in. But my producer is in the background, and he is like going like this, cut, like cut Ted Williams off. And I'm thinking, this is a taped interview. I am not going to tell my father's baseball hero, the greatest living hitter, to stop talking. So I let him finish. The interview went 7 minutes long, 5 minutes too long. They cut out the third answer, and we ran only the first 2 questions. But that day was unforgettable. Hank Aaron and Willie Mays, and then Ted Williams, and they wanted me to cut him off. I don't think so.
How did Ted Williams say he'd fare against Randy Johnson?
He said that he said, I want to see that slider. He said, I think that slider is easier to hit for a left-handed hitter than it is for a right-handed hitter, because the right-handed hitter, that ball breaks down and in over your back foot. You can't see it very well. Left-handed hitter can see it pretty well. He didn't say, oh, I'd knock that guy all over the place. He was very respectful of Randy Johnson, but he told me how he was going to hit Randy Johnson. It was fascinating.
Now, let me ask, we know that we're on the big social media era, and you've talked about Mays, you talked about Aaron, you talked about Ted Williams. Are there players back in the day that you can think of other than them that might be really good now that we just don't get to know as much because they're not playing anymore?
Yeah, I think there are all sorts of players who played, 40, 50, 60 years ago who would be great today. I'm in the vast, vast minority on this, though. I really believe, I think I'm off the topic here, that even 100 years ago, if you were the biggest, strongest, best player in the game, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Honus Wagner, Rogers Hornsby, Walter Johnson. I went to Walter Johnson High School, by the way, named after the greatest pitcher of all time. I wore my sweater for you guys. I think those guys could all figure out how to play today. And yet Curt Schilling once told me that Matt Stairs was better than Babe Ruth, and I almost fell out of my chair. He told me that Mark Lemke, who I love, by the way, and I love Matt Stairs, not the point. He told me Mark Lemke was better than Rogers Hornsby. And I know he was doing it just to get me angry, because he knows how much I love the history of the game and how somebody has to protect the guys who came first. So I think the best players of any era, as long as they're big, strong, and all that, like Babe Ruth, like Walter Johnson, could play today. And this thought that Ted Williams wouldn't be able to hit today, You've got to be kidding me. That is insulting to say that Ted Williams would be overmatched by today's pitching. Today's pitching is like nothing we've ever seen. I have a feeling Ted Williams would have figured out how to hit, 100 miles an hour because he could figure anything out in the batter's box.
I laughed at your Mark Lemke comment because I covered the 91 World Series, and Lemke was pretty big in that World Series,
Yeah.
but it was a very light hitting infielder.
Well, he was a good player, and I loved
Yeah.
him. And by the way, he had the most career at bats without ever getting hit by a pitch. He had like 3,300 played major league at bats and never got hit by a pitch. And I love talking to Mark Lemke. He was a really smart guy, is a really smart guy. But you're right. I just don't think he's better than Rogers Hornsby.
Yeah. Yes, I would say that. So when I think of 1976, and maybe I have a bias here because even though I was born in Chicago and grew up in LA, my aunt was from Detroit, and I was a huge Tigers fan growing up. In 1976, there's a pitcher, Mark Fidrich, who comes out of nowhere and captures the heart of the country. When you saw Fidrich pitch, and I guess the breakout was the nationally televised game against the Yankees, but what did you think of him as a pitcher and the dynamics that he transcended baseball?
Yeah, I remember that game like it was yesterday. Remember, fellas, we used to just have Saturday games on NBC. That's all we had. And now we have Monday night baseball games on live TV in color. And that night, Mark Fidrich pitched. I was mesmerized. The country was mesmerized by what this guy was doing. He wasn't just really good, but he was a character. He was a performer. He was an entertainer, and everything he did by talking to the ball and picking up loads of dirt and everything else, I'd never seen anything like him. And I'm sure there's never been anybody quite like him in baseball history. And it's such a sad, sad thing that he got hurt. His career ended so quickly, but he was a phenomenon for a very short amount of time. But boy, I'll never forget that game on Monday Night Baseball. My two brothers, who, by the way, are in the Baseball Hall of Fame at Catholic University, and my dad, the four of us are watching this guy pitch, and we're just absolutely dazzled by what he's doing.
Yeah, I remember I was a teenager and it was delayed on the West Coast, so we didn't get the game till 8 o'clock. And my dad walks in and says, "Oh, Tigers won 5-1." I'm like, "What, Dad? I'm trying to watch the game here."
Questions fly, lightning strikes as answers try. Buzzers ring chaos in the air. Trivia time,
So, true or false? Mark Fidrich once appeared on the cover of Rolling Stones magazine.
Well, I know so little about music. I'm not sure I've ever read Rolling Stone. So this sounds like a trick question. I'm going to say yes, he appeared on the cover.
He sure did. He appeared on the cover on May 5th, 1977.
Wow. That's so cool. He transcended baseball. It's great.
Right. And I remember the SI cover with, Big Bird behind him, from Sesame Street and stuff like that.
Hey, Tim, after decades, I always say this when we go back 50 years. I can say that it was 50 years ago or half a century, whichever you prefer. But after as long as you've been covering the game, what still makes you fall in love with baseball every season, especially this time of year?
Well, we've talked about the box scores. There's nothing better in the world still for me to get up at dreadfully early, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, open a Diet Mountain Dew since I don't drink coffee, and read the box scores in the quiet of my home. That's still great for me. I still love to watch the games, fellas, and I worry a little bit with all the metrics that we have out there that we're not watching the games as much anymore. We're looking for answers on our phone, on our computer, on our tablet, instead of actually watching the game. But what still makes me really, really happy is when I get to talk to the players after all these years. And even though I am literally 50 years older than some of these players, the really young ones, I still really enjoy it. Like just for instance, last year, I covered the Blue Jays all the way through the playoffs. So during the division series, I got to know Ernie Clement a whole lot better than I had previously because he's on the big stage now. He's in the playoffs. So He's at his locker in Toronto. I go up to him. He's wearing a really old glove. So I said, Ernie, is that your gamer? Do you use that glove in the game? He goes, yeah, this is my gamer. I said, well, what's the story behind that? He goes, I bought it on eBay. So he bought his game glove on eBay. It's a Mizuno, and he bought it from some little Japanese lady in Japan. And then he used it in the major leagues. He didn't just use it. He's one of the premier defensive players in the game, whether he's played second base or third base. So you ask me what makes me happy, it's going to the games, it's talking to the players, and just asking a naive question about, where'd you get that glove from? And he tells me he bought it on eBay. Those are the things that really keep me coming back no matter what.
You know what'll make you sad is the LA Times says box scores now because people said, "Where's our box scores? Where's our box scores?" But because they shut down production so early, they give you the box scores from 2 days ago. So if it's a Saturday, you're reading Thursday's box scores.
Right. Well, this is why I stopped cutting out the box scores after 20 years, because my Washington Post or wherever I was on the road, I couldn't get enough box scores. And the next day I would have to hunt them down. So I just said, all right, deadlines are killing the newspaper business. My box score books are going to have to go away. And I don't care how corny this sounds. I would take long trips from Maryland to San Diego, and I would go through I haven't seen the Padres in a month. So I run through every box score to make sure I understood, what are they doing at second base? What are they doing late innings and, in the bullpen? And when I didn't have my box score book anymore, because I stopped cutting them out, I really, really missed it. It was a security blanket for me. And that was a sad day when I didn't have my box score with me wherever I went.
I could go on about that, Tim, because I used to, when I traveled across country one day, I taped a whole bunch of Angel games and then box scored them all the way to when I got to Florida. So I love the nerdy stuff with your box scores. That's, to me, it's beautiful. It makes me feel like a kid again. But in 2022, you got the Hall of Fame award for baseball writers. What was it like having to be in Cooperstown? Because you talked about your brothers being in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, well, the day I was called to tell me that I won the award, I was at the Harris Teeter grocery store at like 9:30 in the morning, and I was dragging a rotisserie chicken through the self-scanner aisle, and I got the call from Jack O'Connell, and I literally started to cry at the Harris Teeter. I think I'm the first guy ever to cry at the Harris Teeter after getting news quite like that. So the next morning, Johnny Bench called me on the phone. The greatest catcher of all time called me on the phone and said, Tim, welcome to the club. You're one of us now. Now, let's be clear, fellas. I'm not one of them. I'm not in their club. I'm a writer. They're the players. There's a distinct difference there. But I almost, I was just so touched. And then Johnny's voice got really, really soft. And he said, Tim, it's moments like this that take you back to Little League. And I was just about ready to cry again. And he said, and let's face it, Tim, you could still fit into a Little League uniform. So I get blasted by Johnny Bench. So to finish the story, I go to Cooperstown. I make my speech. Never been more terrified in my life than making a speech at the Hall of Fame. I can't believe I got through it without fainting because I was so scared, because it was so important. So after the speech, thank God I didn't faint during the speech. After the speech, I go back to the Otesaga Hotel, and Johnny Bench is out there on the veranda. It's just me and him, and he says, come with me. He says, sit down right here, and I want you to look at that lake, Lake Otesaga, which is the most beautiful scene off the veranda of the Otesaga Hotel. And he said, I want you to look at that lake for 1 minute. I don't want you to say a word. I want you to think about where you are, how you got here, and how many people helped get you here. So there I sat next to Johnny Bench, the greatest catcher of all time, and looked out at that lake, and it was impossible not to tear up again. This is what Johnny did for all the players that come to the Hall of Fame for the first time. He welcomes them with this little ritual on the veranda. And that day he did it for a dinky little sports writer. And then the next day I'm on the bus going to the real induction for the real players. And I'm on a bus with all Hall of Famers and me. That's it. It's like, who doesn't belong on this bus? So this regal, elegant looking gentleman comes up to me because there's only one seat left on the bus right next to me. He says, "Can I sit next to you?" And it was Sandy Koufax.
Oh, wow.
So now I'm sitting next to Sandy Koufax for the trip over to the ballpark. And Sandy was one of the great pitchers at all time, but he could be a little prickly if you asked the wrong question. So I had to call an audible here because if I'd said, "Sandy, tell me about that great curveball," or "Why did you retire when you did?" He's heard that 10 million times. So I asked him, because he was a great basketball player in college, I asked Sandy Koufax, first question, I said, "Could you dunk it easily when you were at the University of Cincinnati?" And now his eyes got this big, because somebody asked him a question that he hasn't been asked, I'm guessing, in 50 years. So he looks at me and he goes, "Look how big my hands are." Now, we all know he has historically big hands. And then he shows me and he goes, "Look how long my arms are. I have a 37-inch sleeve." He said, "So I got these giant hands, these really long arms, and I could really jump." He said, "During layup lines," he said, "I was the last guy out, and I was the first guy to dunk it in layup lines every time." So, and then we talked basketball for 15 minutes, the NBA, everything else, on our way to the Hall of Fame Cooperstown induction. 15 minutes talking only basketball with Sandy Koufax. It was one of the great 15 minutes of my entire life.
And Tim, that's exactly why, in my opinion, you belonged on that bus, a Hall of Famer in the sense of the word. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today. Always a blast talking baseball with one of the great storytellers from ESPN and Sports Illustrated. Tim, we really appreciate the time.
Well, thanks very much for having me, fellas. I can't even begin to tell you what a pleasure it is to talk to guys who have the same shared interest, same shared love in baseball. It's the greatest game ever, and you guys personify that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tim.
Hey, I mean this in the nicest way possible and with the utmost respect, having recently just met you. You, Tim.
That's what he says to everyone who loves. Oh my God, so
that'll be our greeting to you every time.
F you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Rookie cards of baseball, basketball, and football stars are iconic pieces of American history, and they have been outstanding investments over the last 50 years. Now, key issues of Sports Illustrated, professionally graded and encapsulated by CGC, have emerged as an exciting alternative to trading cards. ThePit.com is the leading online exchange for investment-grade sports magazines. General Manager Mark Humphreys offers Sports Illustrated first cover editions featuring stars like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Derek Jeter, Ken Griffey Jr., and so many more. Joining us again this week and every week is Mark Humphreys, who knows a thing or two about the value of these issues of Sports Illustrated by collectors. And Mark, I'm thinking this week with Joe Morgan of the Big Red Machine on the cover, this is a good one.
Yeah, it is, because it represents the best player of his era at his peak. Joe Morgan was appreciated in his day. This was the baseball preview issue in between his two most valuable player seasons, 1975 and 1976. But he was even better than people realized in the day, because they didn't have wins above replacement back then. And when we look at it in retrospect, his record shines even greater. Morgan led the majors, not just the National League, but the majors in wins above replacement, which is currently considered the most important overall statistic, weighing all the contributions. 4 out of 5 years, 72, 73, 75, and 76. So this is right before the 76 season when he would have the what would become the wins above replacement title for the 4th time. The only time he missed out during those 5 years, he finished second to Mike Schmidt in 1974, a year when they gave the most valuable player to my favorite player at the time, Steve Garvey, which in retrospect looks like an awful decision. Incidentally, Joe Morgan was my favorite player of the non-Dodgers because as a 16-year-old who was 5'2" on my first driver's license, I admired the fact that Joe Morgan at 5'7" was the most valuable player, and that a little guy could make it in the majors. So this issue was Morgan's second Sports Illustrated cover. His first was 10 years earlier in 1966 with the Houston Astros. So I think they were called the Astros by then. They started out as the Colt 45s, but by 66, he was pictured with his double play partner, Sonny Jackson, who was also a great young player, but didn't continue on the way Morgan did. Morgan continued to build on his skills to become the best player in the game in his late 20s. And that's the 1966 cover, which is titled Astros in Orbit, is very collectible because Morgan was a key piece of the Big Red Machine, along with Bench and Pete Rose and George Foster. Such a great lineup, maybe the greatest of all time. This is the middle cover of Sports Illustrated career. He had a final one, 1983, with Pete Rose and Tony Perez. A Rosy Reunion was the title on that one. So look at the span of Morgan's career. 3 Sports Illustrated covers, 1966, 1976, 1983. That's a span of what, 17 years?
Yep.
And 3 different teams, 3 different decades. This cover is not as popular as his first cover, and that's standard. Although this is his only cover with the Reds, and it was at his peak. So there's only been one sale that's recorded in the public database. It's not that impressive. It was for $79 for an issue graded 7.5 a couple years ago. 7.5 is a mid-grade copy, nice, but not the top level. The real Big Red Machine collectors would be eager to buy this issue in a 9 grade, and it would go for several $100s, in my opinion, at that level. This is a great piece, and you can put together, a collector can put together a really nice set of Big Red Machine Sports Illustrated covers from the 1970s, and they are, and this would be a critical piece of any such collection, looking at possibly the most fabulous collection of hitters ever assembled on one team.
Only thepit.com offers competitive buy now and sell now quotes on graded magazines online, as well as many of the most popular modern PSA graded rookie cards, including Shohei Ohtani, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Nikola Jokic, and Steph Curry. Trade sports stars like stocks at thepit.com. All right, this is something that's a little bit near and dear to the three of us, as we all grew up on the TV radio side and more on the radio side when it came to baseball. I mean, I think it's fair to say that the three of us are the last of a generation that grew up listening to baseball games. Now every game is on TV. That was not the case 50 years ago. You listened on a nightly basis to baseball games. And back then, 435,000 hours will be on the radio airwaves in the 1976, up significantly from the year before. And the biggest change isn't just quantity, but Bill, like the teams themselves making changes, all sorts of movement in the broadcast world.
But 12 managers left jobs, but 17 broadcasters at the end of the 75 season either moved, retired, or were fired from their job. Two of the guys, Bob Prince, Milo Hamilton. I just liked how they crossed over. Bob Prince went to the Pirates, then the Astros, and back to the Pirates. Milo Hamilton, who I listened to when I was in Houston, went to the Braves, the Pirates, and then back to the Astros. I mean, just a fun little listen of these guys. I mean, for me, you talk about listening to broadcasts. I didn't always sit in front of the radio. I would be outside playing around, and I'd always have the radio on listening to the Dodgers or Angels.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, one thing I think we've all grown accustomed to now as well is the ability to pause things and go back and look at replays as you're watching a game and stuff. But back then, you knew that that was not possible. So like when a big moment happened, you'd stop, you'd wait, and you'd hear that whole sequence and wait for the outcome. And it just would build and build with the drama because you didn't have the ability to kind of listen with one ear and then go, oh, you know what? Something happened there. I'm going to go back and look at it. You had to pay attention. It was really engrossing. I miss it, to be quite honest.
It was the best part. I remember listening to Ricky Henderson break the stolen base record, and I was washing my car in the front, but I had my radio on the porch. I just miss those days where where it was just with you, and when you knew something big, you stopped. Like if you knew like an at bat was coming up or a certain player, you would stop what you're doing and just like sit in place and go, "Come on, man, get a hit." And you don't do that with TV, or for the most part, you don't do it with TV.
No. I used to listen to the games, and I'd have like a bat and a mitt and a ball, and I'd pretend to be the pitcher or the hitter, as I was listening to the game.
Yep. And some of the best broadcasters, as we know, could really do that, like Chickern used to say, give you a word's eye view. So you would feel like you were right there in the stands when he talk about the batter, how he's up at the plate, and he's shaking his bat twice. The pitcher takes a step off. It was just the most marvelous time of childhood.
Yeah. And, we so grew up where those radio announcers in particular were such a part of the team.
Yeah.
I remember vividly that the A's Charlie Finley wouldn't pay to have the team on the radio. So one year they were on like the student radio station at Cal, had no wattage whatsoever. It was just embarrassing. And even as a 10, 11-year-old, I'm like, how come I can't get A's games? I live 40 miles from Oakland, and it was that small of a wattage. And then in 1980, once he sold, the first thing that the new owners did, the Haas family, is they hired Lon Simmons, longtime Giants announcer, and Bill King as their radio guys. And I was like, wow, we are big time now. And, Mark, you had it with Ernie, and Bill, you grew up listening to Dick Enberg and, Don Drysdale. It just was such an important part of the team.
Right.
They were your only way. They were your only way into your team in terms of you didn't read you want newspaper and those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up listening to Vince Scully, and I listened to Dick Enberg doing the Angels, and back in Chicago, Jack Brickhouse. These were legendary guys.
Yep, great times. Absolutely loved it. A great leap backward. Olga Korbut sparked a revolution in gymnastics with her daring acrobatics, but the sport has now evolved beyond her influence. This is going to be the year or the summer of Nadia. We had the summer of George. This is the summer of Nadia. Nadia Comaneci. She's just 14 years old, ushering in a new era, dominating competitions with her unmatched precision and perfect scores that are about to come. I think part of the thing with Nadia and Olga was, behind the Iron Curtain, these people were kind of unknown. They were mysterious. And then all of a sudden, this like little, 4'11" pixie is just doing the most amazing things. But Nadia Comaneci about to. We mentioned this, I think, last week. She's going to go from who's that to the most well-known women's athlete in the world in a matter of months coming up.
They said that she was discovered at the age of 6. I just because my daughter's 7, I think, man, to think that you're that great at 6 years old that someone could come out and go, you're going to be dominant.
That's what happened to me.
I know it is. I know it is. You know?
That might have happened to this next guy. A fear of flying. Jackie Jensen was a standout athlete and rising star. He married an Olympic diver by the name of Zoe Ann Olsen in a highly celebrated golden couple union in 1949. But he's one of the first two sports stars. He shined in football and baseball. Billy, most people don't know who Jackie Jensen was, but this guy was a Hall of Fame type baseball player, and then he just quit.
Yeah, and if you look at, was it 5, 6 years of his career, he had close to 700 runs batted in, which was more than the legendary Ted Williams. But he had an issue, as you said, Scott, with flying. He didn't like it. However, there are people that said it wasn't flying, it was his marriage. That he was so concerned about losing his wife, and she was upset that he was gone all the time, that the flying just became his excuse for trying to get back with his wife. And he ended up doing that. They end up getting divorced. He ends up sort of going down a bad trail. He tries to come back to baseball. It just doesn't work. But Jackie Jensen is one of those guys that if you look at his stats, you go, this guy was amazing. He had Hall of Fame written all over him, but it just unfortunately, due to wife or flying, didn't work out.
I mean, you look at his stats. I mean, he was a 3-time All-Star. He was the AL MVP with the Red Sox in '58, won a Gold Glove. 3 times he led the American League in RBIs. He led the American League in stolen bases 1 year. I mean, he's in the Boston Red Sox Hall of Fame. I mean, between the Yankees, Senators, and Red Sox, that was a great career that got cut short at 32.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really, you can somewhat not just blame his fear of flying, but it was the expansion west that really hurt his career, because up until the 50s and stuff, you could get around via train to most of these games. Maybe they had to fly every once in a while, but it was a pretty much train. Once baseball started moving west and you had to fly, that's when his phobia became too much. He went and got hypnosis treatment in Vegas. That allowed him to briefly return, but his performance by then had declined. And he retired early, 1961, just 3 years after his MVP season. Now, we've seen guys do that because their performance declined, but he basically walked out at the top of his game. Very sad.
Yeah, I have a solution. It does involve a time machine, but you have to.
That'll work.
That can happen. Yeah, that'll work. Yeah.
Yes. Well, it worked in Back to the Future. Anyway, what I would do is get in a time machine and get that Madden cruiser, and him and John could just take that cruiser to every game his team was playing.
But the thing is, the Madden cruiser was going to 1 game a week. Jackie Jensen have to be in that cruiser, every 3 days.
Well, no, because they only had half their games on the road.
Oh,
so
okay, that's fair.
And you just have to get to that one city for the first of 3 games or 4 games or wherever it is. And then,
Except for,
we're going to do that. We're going to find Jackie and tell him.
Yeah.
Yep. He's on, it's on now.
The first thing the time machine needs to do is take him from the dead.
Yes. Well, if a time machine go back, he's alive. We tell him, hey, you're going to have a couple heart attacks. You're eventually going to die. But still, up until that point, you're going to take the Madden cruiser.
Right. He was only 55 when he died.
I know. He's very young.
Time machine that could have done more for his heart,
Yeah.
Come down the stretch they come.
All right. With a little help from our friend Dave Johnson there, let's do For the Record, shall we? Mark, Calvin Hill, where's he going?
Boy, so here's my beloved Cowboy, okay? And he's going to sign with the Washington Redskins. It just makes me so sad. He had actually left the Cowboys, and he had gone to that USFL, not USFL, WFL, and he played for the Hawaii team. But then he comes back. His career was never the same. He had an unbelievable rookie season. He was Rookie of the Year, And then he had battled so many injuries over his career. And people don't remember Calvin, but he had this kind of upright stance when he would run the ball. And he went to Yale, very smart dude, and best known for his son, the great basketball player, uh, Grant Hill? No.
Grant, yeah.
So
Bill, you got a couple quick ones?
Let's see. Yeah, I'll just do Jennifer Chandler, one of our guests from a year or so ago. 16 years old. She won the 3-meter diving event. There you go.
she'd make a great guest on our show, wouldn't she?
She would be. She's all very nice, I've heard.
She's a nice lady. We still haven't taken up her invitation to go to Birmingham.
That's
Yeah.
true.
We'll have to do it.
We'll have to get the Madden Cruiser out.
Yes, and see if but Jackie might be using it. So
Yvonne Goolagong upset Chris Everett 6-3, 7-6 to win the Virginia Slim tournament in Philadelphia, stretching her unbeaten streak to, get this, 15 straight wins without losing a set. That's pretty dominant. She's beating Everett for the first time in a string of 9 matches. She'll be on a cover later this month. One of the more underrated stars of her time, Yvonne Goolagong.
Every name has a story. These are the faces in the crowd.
Bill, faces in the crowd.
okay, just saddle up right here, boys. This is Ricky Stewart. He was an Oklahoma high school wrestling star. His record was 57-0-1. He had a 55-match win streak. He was 2-time NCAA champion, a 4-time All-American, and in 1981 championship, he pinned his former teammate, Dave Schultz.
Ugh.
Now, how do we know Dave Schultz? Not the hockey guy. Come on, he's not that guy. He's the guy that was tragically murdered in 1996 by John DuPont. Yes. Now, for poor Mr. Stewart, he was severely burned in 2020, over 74% of his body in a home explosion.
Ooh.
But when he was released from the hospital 3 years later, I think 2.5 years later, everybody in the hospital gave him a standing ovation as he left because he was not expected to live, but he had such drive and such focus that he willed himself to get better.
Wow. That's incredible.
That is.
Wow.
Good
Wow.
Lord.
I tip my hat to Ricky Stewart. Wow.
Cedric Oliver, Mark.
Yes, he paced the Hamilton College to its first basketball title. It's like a tournament for Division II and III at Utica, New York. He's a freshman. He set the single season scoring record, only 19.3 points a game. What's interesting is that you look at his picture, it looks like he's 27. So, maybe that's why he was so good. But he actually ended up, he's in the Greater Utica Sports Hall of Fame. So in 1992, he got inducted. So, and the last they said of him was that he was in the Kansas City area and he was a regional sales manager for a corporation. But his basketball career, well known. If you go to Utica, New York, and ask them, they'll tell you about him.
They will. Cedric Oliver, the Utica has the key to Utica.
Yes.
He's in there with Wilbur.
Was that in a movie?
No, that's Attica. Attica.
Oh, there you go.
But he's inducted with Wilbur Chris, Alan Shiz Fry, Ted Kroll. All these names you've heard of. Lou Ambers.
That was Dog Day Afternoon, wasn't it?
That was. They wanted. It was in a tournament time, so they were out there going Utica. And they're going, get me a Cedric.
That would be great to do.
Yeah.
That'd be so funny. 19th hole. Let's close this thing out, shall we, Mark?
Yes, let's close it up. So I found this really fascinating because I don't always do letters to the editor, but this one was really kind of interesting because the way the person ended it. Okay, so she was talking about, it was Ray Thompson, I believe. So it was about Jonty Skinner. I think we talked the issue before about him. He's trying to make this thing that we shouldn't be so focused on where your country is. You should be able to enter the Olympics just by yourself. Like I'm Mark Hoffman from Hoffmanville, or I don't know, or from Los Angeles, and I'm representing myself at the Olympics. Because he said that the Olympics is more about individuals than countries. And I'm thinking, well, no, because you're representing your country. The Olympics is about your country. The individuals get famous, but it's really about the countries. You can't go there if you're not representing your country. So I don't know. I think he has
Kinda-
that backwards.
He did. He kind of missed the whole premise behind the Olympics.
But he made his point.
Yep. Bill.
Okay, this is from Jill Shipstead. She's a soloist with the Ice Capades or Holiday on Ice. She's from Minneapolis. She's not happy. She says, after reading your article on ice shows, I can only conclude that nobody likes us but the people. My personal thanks to all those wonderful people.
Wow.
I want to thank all the little people
Yep, I'm
that
not
helped me
messing
get
with you.
here.
Not a chance.
Who
But
was
by
that?
the way,
Jill
go ahead.
Shipstead, she's the soloist on Holiday on Ice from Minnesota.
She is not happy.
No, the people, yes.
By the way, so I rambled so much, and I found Ray Thompson from New Jersey, and he
Let's go back
was
to
basically,
Cedric Oliver.
but John T. Skinner, he said, is a man without a country. Why can't he swim in the Olympics that way? He ought to be represent himself
Mark, do
without
you have
carrying a
any more
flag
on-
or wearing some nation's Olympic badge.
Mark, do you have any more on Rusty Staub?
No, but I'm going back to Larry Zonka and that first
How
show.
about Larry
because-
Drew? Talk about it.
Utica.
Because I sounded like an idiot because I didn't have it in front of me.
Oh, I don't think anyone cares.
Wrapping up this week's look back at the April 12th, 1976 issue of Sports Illustrated, from Joe Morgan dominating as the best player of the decade to Honest Pleasure rolling in the Florida Derby, Shirley Babashoff carrying American swimming, and we previewed the 1976 season in baseball with a huge thank you to our guest, the great Tim Kurkjian, for joining us. For Bill, for Mark, we'll catch you next time on Past Our Prime. Utica! Utica!